This is the first in a 6-part series of programs based on Deepak Chopra's book, The Third Jesus, The Christ We Cannot Ignore. I'm delighted to have Deepak here with us to talk about this very important topic. Please join me in giving him a very warm welcome. Deepak? Right, you make the point in the book that not only is Jesus universal, but you also make the point that it's important not just to know what he said, but to try to get into what the consciousness was from which he spoke the truths that he spoke.
Unless we get into that consciousness, then we really do not understand what he's saying, and even more important, it's impossible to do what he's saying.
Absolutely. So we have 3 Jesuses. We have the first Jesus, the historical Jesus, that we don't really know a whole lot about, don't have a whole lot of concrete information. We have the theological Jesus that we've been talking about, and the institution that grew up in his name and around an understanding, albeit sometimes a limited understanding, of his teachings. And then we have what you're calling the third Jesus. And you write on page 9, you say that the first 2 versions of Jesus hold a tragic aspect for me because you blame them for stealing something precious. Talk about what it is that you feel they stole that was precious.
What they stole was really precious was that we can all aspire to and reach that state of God consciousness. I'll tell you what inspired me to talk about the third Jesus. The third Jesus is, of course, the state of God consciousness, and something that goes even beyond God consciousness, that's called unity consciousness.
Right. And what I get in reading the third Jesus is that you're presenting such a paradigm shift for Christianity in exploding our understanding of Jesus as a teacher of God consciousness.
I think that's very well said by Bishop Spong, that those that listen to the experience then have their own interpretation of the experience. And that interpretation comes from what we might say ordinary waking state of consciousness. So even though Jesus is expounding on his experience of God consciousness, the person who's interpreting and writing the story is doing it from their level of consciousness. So there's a split here,
Right.
There's a dichotomy between the actual experience and the interpretation of the experience.
You know, you've subtitled the book, The Christ We Cannot Ignore, and that kind of carries with it a sense of urgency. You know, we cannot ignore this Christ. Why would you say we can't? What's at stake?
What's at stake is our future as a species. We have reached the point now where our modern capacities and our tribal identities risk our extinction. You know, we are the only species that is capable of destroying ourselves and destroying every other species on this planet, and we might do it in the name of God.
In Unity, we would say that Jesus is not the great exception, but is really the great example. He didn't say so much, look at me. I think he said, look at what I'm looking at. Look at what I point to. Look at a way that I have found, and see if that way works for you.
So I believe that Jesus existed. I believe that he was a mystic. I believe that he had an experience of God consciousness and unity consciousness. I believe that he stayed in that consciousness. I believe that he was a healer. And I believe that he saw himself as a messenger. But as I've read in the Gospel of John, he says, all things that I do, you can do as well, and more.